Okay, I'd like to talk about the 1, 4, 5 chords in the key of C major, or any major key. And it can be a little confusing. If when I say 1 chord, 4 chord, if you don't know what I'm talking about, hopefully you'll know by the end of this video. Now, when we look at a major scale, like C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. How many tones are there? There are 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the last is really 1 again. It's the octave, so it's a C again. And we can build a triad. I mentioned that in the last lesson. A triad consists of a root, third, and fifth. But if I build that off C, that's the first, third, and fifth of that C scale. But if I build it off the second tone of the C scale, D, that's the second, fourth, and sixth tones of the C scale, but within the triad, we still call that a root, third, fifth. And then off the third tone of the scale, this would be a root, third, fifth, so on. Root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth. Now, so you don't want to get confused with a 4 chord or root, third, fifth. They are two different things. When we're talking about the 1 chord, we are talking about a triad, a major triad, C major, off the first tone of the C major scale. D minor is the 2 chord. E minor is the 3 chord. F major is the 4 chord. G is the 5 chord. A minor is the 6 chord. B diminished is the 7 chord. The 7 chord is diminished in a major key. And then the 1 chord again. So what's significant about the 1, 4, 5 chords? When you think about the quality of the chords, that's what we're talking about. So the 1 chord is, I'll just go through the scale again and say the quality of the chords. It's major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. So off the 1 chord, you've got C major, and then if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, that's F major. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's G major, that's the 5 chord. F major, I should have mentioned, is the 4 chord, and C is the 1 chord. 1, 4, 5, 1. So those are the only 3 major chords in the key, in a major scale key, is the chord built off the first tone, the 4th tone, and the 5th tone. And they make up, you know, like as far as basic songs, like a real basic country song or a folk song, you'll hear these chords all the time. You could write hundreds of songs with these chords. 1 chord, 4 chord, 5, 1, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 5, 1. Now if I did that last part and I didn't come back to the 1, so if I just stopped there and went home, that would feel incomplete until I play the home chord again. So there we're talking about cadences, and that when you go from a 5 chord to a 1 chord, that's a really strong cadence. It's like a magnet. The 5 chord is drawn back to the 1 chord, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's that's called a perfect cadence. Now you could also have the 4 chord resolve back to the 1. And you'll hear that at the end of hymns, right? You've heard that, you know, where it's Amen, you know, Amen. So that's a plagal cadence, but the perfect cadence is the most common. And the 5 chord, when you think of the triad in the key of C, that would be the G chord, G, B, D, and that's the the root, 3rd, 5th of that triad. If we went and extended it another tone and added, what's the next odd number after 5? 1, 3, 5, 7. That's even a stronger cadence to the 1 chord. There's just a real strong pull when you make it a 5-7 chord. We call that a 5-7 chord to a 1, okay? Now, yeah, there are different types of 7th chords. The 5 chord, and I should have mentioned too, that the 1 chord is called the tonic chord. That's the home key. The 4 chord is called subdominant, and the 5 chord is called dominant. And when you make it a 7th chord, the 5 chord a 7th chord, that's called a dominant 7th chord. So when you hear musicians say, oh, it's a dominant 7th, you know, that's what that is talking about. That's the only major chord that has that type of 7th. And what is a 7th? A 7th is an interval, besides being the next odd number after 5, 1, 3, 5, 7. When you think of 1 to 7, that's called a 7th interval. And this is a minor 7th. Now, the 5-7 chord is not a minor chord, but the 7th in the chord is a minor 7th. And you have major 7ths. Now, let me explain what a minor 7th is. If you have the octave, like a G to a G, and if you go a whole step down from that octave, that's a minor 7th. If you go a half step down from the octave, that's a major 7th. Notice how dissonant that sounds compared to a minor 7th. Okay? Now, in the 1 chord, in the tonic chord, if we made a 7th off C, root, sorry, I'm tongue-tied here, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, that chord has a major 7th in it. It's a major chord with a major 7th. See, here's the octave, and if we go down 1/2 step from the octave, that's a major 7th. That interval itself is dissonant, but when you play it in the chord, that's very mysterioso, right? It's kind of a beautiful chord, and you hear that in jazz. Major 7th chords are very common in jazz. And then if you go to the subdominant, the 4 chord in the key of C, and you don't alter any of the notes of the key, and you make a 7th, that is also a major 7th. But the 5 chord has a minor 7th in it. It's a major triad with a minor 7th, and that's what we call a dominant 7th. That's a term that, you know, hopefully I've explained it a little bit, that it's a major chord with a minor 7th interval, and it naturally falls on the 5 chord of a major key. 1, 4, 5, 7. Now in some folk songs, country songs, they'll go like 1, 4, 5, 7, 5, 7, 1. And you'll hear that. It almost sounds like 2 different chords. The 5 chord, 5, 7 to a 1. But it's really the same chord, just adding a 7th to it. So hopefully that explains things a little bit. In the tablature on this sheet called 1-4-5 chords, you have the whole scale written out in triads. So you want to think of it as in two ways. The 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, 1. Or think of it as C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major. Now these are kind of hard to finger. You know, notice how stretched out I am. You know, you might have trouble fingering these, but go ahead and try it. You know, give it a good try. And a lot of times you're using the pinky and doing a 4-fret spread. Now, and then below that, I show the 1, C is the 1 chord, F is the 4 chord, G is the 5 chord, C. And then below that in the tablature, I've got the full chords, C to G, and then G 7th to C. And to give you a little technical explanation of why that is so, it's such a strong pull from the 5-7 chord to the tonic. If you look at root, 3rd, 5th, 7th of the G chord, the 3rd and the 7th make up a tritone. And they each resolve a half step. The 7th resolves a half step down, and the 3rd resolves a half step up to the C triad. And that's what makes that a strong, strong cadence. When you have a half step resolving, that we call that a tendency tone. It tends to resolve a certain way. That is, and you have that tritone, which is kind of dissonant. In the medieval times, the monks called that the devil's interval. You know, it was diabolical. But, you know, I mean, in food, you got to have a little salt, and you got to have a little sweetness. You know, this would be the salt, you know, or the hotness, you know, like hot pepper. Okay, so think of it that way, and hopefully this helps you to understand when we say we're in the key of G, play the 5 chord. Okay, I know it's D7 to G. So you know, you have to eventually transcribe this to all the keys and understand the relationship. And it's kind of like the planets, you know, all the chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, they have a kind of relationship and a cyclical relation to each other in the key. So, you know, when you think of the key of C, we think of C as the main thing, you know, it's the tonic note. But the other notes are very important too, and they're kind of like the other planets around the sun of C. Okay, so I'm getting very philosophical here, but you know, I just try to explain things in different ways, and hopefully it sinks in. But this is just an introduction to this. Eventually, you'll just think, oh yeah, 5 chord. You know, I know that. You know, and you'll know it. So if you like this video, hit like and subscribe to John Hedger Guitar Studio right here on YouTube, and also go to Facebook and like my Facebook page, John Hedger Guitar Studio. Thank you so much.